Okay, welcome everybody. This is Nanette Kennedy with Evolution Revolution and Humanities team, and this is our weekly book discussion group. We are on chapter 11 of Conversations with God, book 4, Awaken the Species, by Neale Donald Walsch. So you are more than welcome to start reading, Linda.
Okay. You hear me okay? Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm just going to read the very last paragraph from chapter 10 because it leads us into this conversation. And it's God speaking at this point. And here's the great secret that highly evolved beings are focusing their energies on sharing. Full integration can occur at any moment. The process can be condensed. An entire civilization can begin living as an awakened species whenever it wishes. Okay, it's time to know how to do that. I'm grateful for being given this opportunity to get to a place where my mind can at least feel more clear about how all of this could have happened. But I'm ready to move forward now. If we're being invited to awaken the species, I wish to know to what? What is the way of being to which we might invite everyone to awaken? Are we supposed to simply embrace and adopt the principles and practices, understandings and behaviors of a totally different civilization, living in a different dimension? Can't we achieve a better life as individuals and a better tomorrow as a global collective, using the highest values of humanity? You certainly can. But it may be helpful and beneficial to you to think in terms of different energies, not different civilizations. This whole question of what makes life work wonderfully, joyously, and masterfully is not a matter of local customs. It is a matter of universal truth regarding life's fundamental energy. There is only one energy or essence in the cosmos, and that is what you have called, in human language, love. The ideas that highly evolved beings have sought to place before humanity are simply thoughts about how to live and love in a way that is more beneficial to your species and will give each individual a chance to advance in their personal evolution more quickly. Hebes don't assert that their way of living is right for humans. They simply offer you the opportunity to decide for yourself. This is their way of helping you, even as you may seek to help others to awaken. So it may be of benefit to take a look at these ideas, see if or where you may find a contrast with human behaviors, and decide if you choose to try some new ways of being human. Oh, I agree. And I already know there will be contrasts. So tell me the biggest difference. I mean, let's cut to the chase here. The most striking and significant difference, is that highly evolved beings are utterly, completely, absolutely, and entirely without violence of any kind. They do not engage in physical violence. They do not project verbal violence. They do not even momentarily entertain violence in their thoughts. They do not call violence self-defense. They do not call it entertainment. And they certainly do not call it sport. They simply cannot justify or support the inflicting of physical or emotional pain, not even the slightest discomfort, on any other entity. Is there a formula by which they have been able to achieve this? I mean, what do they know that we don't know that opens the way for them to be like that? All violence has disappeared from their culture because all anger has disappeared from reality, from their reality. And that's because Well, it's because they live in the knowing that they have nothing to lose by being good and kind and caring and compassionate and unselfish and giving and accepting and unconditional loving in every instant of every moment of every circumstance or situation. They know that they cannot lose their life for any reason or in any way, nor can they lose anything else of value to them, because nothing else is of value to them other than life itself. Their very existence, which they understand, is what provides them with the opportunity for the only experience they desire, which is the experience of their divinity. So these beings cannot be killed, not even by an outward circumstance having nothing to do with being violent with each other, like a black hole, just to make something up here, swallowing their civilization's home. There is no outward circumstance within the physical universe that could cause them to equate the changing of their manifested form to losing their life or ending their existence. So moving from the physical into the non-physical isn't seen by them as the end of anything. That's exactly right. They know that they will always exist and never cease to be, no matter what happens to their physically manifested forms. That includes a black hole swallowing any planet on which they may happen to be embodying. When you do not fear losing your life ever, you have no reason to ever become violent. What about losing something or not being able to get something you desire? You have already been told by masters on your planet that desire that you feel must be satiated the desire that you feel must be satiated is the cause of all suffering, and suffering is the cause of all violence. Eliminate suffering and violence goes away, evaporates, dissolves, disappears. If you're fully awakened, if you're a highly evolved being, you escape all desires. You escape the incapacitation of desires. You escape the ruination of being ruled by your desires. When you know that your life will never end, you know that anything you wish to experience, you have an eternity to create, or to recreate if you've had it once and wish to experience it again. There's a saying in the cosmos: eternal life brings eternal peace. If, on the other hand, you imagine that you have a limited time in which to experience what you desire to experience, you will give up your peace to acquire it, or to hold on to it if and when you do acquire it. Well, that's the story of humanity in 50 words or less, for sure. So life for Hebes from another dimension is felt as an eternal reality. It is an eternal reality. Life is an eternal experience for all sentient beings. But few sentient beings who think of themselves and express themselves primarily as a physical body experience their eternally as a felt reality. They experience their physicality as their felt reality, and they imagine that when their physicality is over, their existence comes to an end. At best, they hold the idea of eternal life as a concept, a theory, a doctrine, or belief, as something that might be, but about which they are not sure. Hang on. Because the fully awakened entities I have been talking about exist and have their being in another dimension, They are certain that life is eternal. Well, sure they are, because it's easy for them. They're experiencing it, not just thinking about it or praying about it or hoping about it. And they have been experiencing it since forever. So have you. The difference is they know it and you don't. They remember it. But can we remember it? How can all of us remember it? What do you think you're doing here? Keep going. Keep going, Nanette. Okay, I'll keep going.
I forgot I was on mute, so
Oh,
I was talking away. It's like, hey, man. And I heard you talking over me. I was like, yep. Silly old me. Well, I was going to say, does anybody have anything are there any questions or comments?
I've got a comment.
Go ahead.
Thank you. This is essentially what meditation is about, is to just enter the eternity. And it happened now to me as Linda was reading. Right now, I went into sort of a trance right here, right now, in the last minute or two. What are you smiling about, Linda? Were you in a trance too?
I'm often in a trance when I'm reading.
Okay, so it's your fault for transmitting the message. Thanks a lot.
And truth be told, I kind of tranced out there, just in the last 3 or 4 paragraphs, and part of it was,
it's a powerful transmission. The words are a powerful transmission.
Yep. And I guess what I was thinking is that, if you're wanting something you don't have, you're causing yourself that pain, as it were. I mean, if it's something you really want that you are not able to have. And in my book, it's on page 67. Neil says, what about losing something or not being able to get something you desire? Well, the losing something really was resonant to me, because I am constantly losing my keys to my car. And even though I have like 3 places I generally put them, just usually no more than there, sometimes I throw them in my purse, and that is not where I keep them, because I don't want to have to dig for them. But I can't tell you how many times I've gone to my 3 regular places and not been able to find my keys. And I get into this little fit of panic of, did my granddaughter pick my keys up? Because she's been known to do such things. And when this question, what about losing something? And that could be something as small as keys or a loved one, or it could be anything. But what God says next is, you've already been told by masters on your planet that desire that you feel must be satiated. I messed up on this one too. You've already been told by masters on your planet that desire that you feel must be satiated is the cause of all suffering. And suffering is the cause of all violence. I wouldn't get violent over my keys. I can tell you that right now. But it makes sense to me, especially in the wake of the Las Vegas shooting, that the shooter felt in some way, and I don't have any way of knowing this, but he must have felt something was missing for him to become that violent. So anyway, that's just a thought that came to me. Over.
I had a strange thought about the shooter this morning, actually. You know, each of us come into form for a purpose. We have some reason that we chose to come into third dimension, to learn something, to experience something we haven't experienced, to whatever, or to fulfill a mission. That's kind of my life, is I came in to fulfill a mission. What if that shooter's mission was to do this? Because what this will do, because of what it will do. I mean, I don't know what it's going to do. It's certainly changing the conversation. It's certainly got, for example, the NRA sounding reasonable for once about something, which is like, I've never heard them be reasonable about anything. They're just a bunch of fearmongers from my point of view. But all of a sudden, there's like an actual conversation happening. So I don't know. It just, and then you hear the story that the girlfriend tells about how he would lay in bed at night and cry. And I just, this morning in meditation, that thought just came like, what if he really felt that this was his mission to do this in order to move humanity forward? I mean, at the sacrifice of great lives, but again, not great deaths, because nobody died. That's the knowledge we know. That's the knowledge that Neil knows, is that ultimately nobody did die that day. Sure, in the third dimension, it looks like they did. But those spirits made that sacrifice for us. All of them did. And they probably all knew they were going to do it. The spirits did. So I don't know. That was just a thought that came to me this morning. Trying to, put those pieces together. His crying. What was the torture? Because that's, ultimately that's what we know to be the issue here, is that we don't, as human beings, process our emotions. And that's what this all ties into. The lack of processing the emotions is what causes the anger, and then everything kind of falls apart from there. Over.
I think that there's a lot of sense to that, because I think there's a lot of things in our world that are so inexplicable. And it can go into politics, it can go into ISIS, whatever. Pick a card, any card. That for us in this realm that we are in right now, we need to be able to pamper ourselves with some thought that it's what you just said, Linda. That maybe he hadn't been planning it all of his life or anything. But maybe at the very least, it's a possibility that he had some thought in his head that maybe if it's a big enough, bad enough disaster, people will start to wake up. Over. Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, Nanette, what you just said, that maybe he hadn't been planning it all of his life, but if that was his mission to do that, then obviously everything from the start of his life has led towards that.
Yep. So what you're saying is, at some point, he became aware that he was probably aware all of his life that he had a mission, but wasn't sure what that mission was going to be. And as he aged, that's a really good point, Angela.
It goes back to that, the little soul in the sun.
Yep. Very good. Very good.
It might actually explain the quantity of guns that he had, too, you know, because he didn't buy all of those right then. He's been amassing them for a while. And maybe he didn't even realize why, you know?
Yeah.
Well, and I was just going to add, because the last 3 or 4 days, I have not been listening to the news as much, not for any reason except for I've just not had the time to do it. And I know this is a little off track, but did the girlfriend, was she able to present any reasons?
No, she, you know, the only piece that I heard that was of interest was this idea that he would lay in bed at night and cry about something, and she didn't know why, or, you know, but he was a tortured soul. He was definitely tortured over something. She had no idea. She thought the reason he was sending her all the money was he was getting ready to break up with her. That's what she says.
Or he knew he wasn't going to be around.
Yeah, but she didn't. Yeah, right.
All right, well, let's, if anybody's got any other comments, go ahead and make the comment. Otherwise, let's start chapter 12. And just so everybody knows, I do have my granddaughter here, so if all of a sudden I go to my picture, it means that she's needing my undivided attention, even though she knows that during this hour, that's not supposed to happen. All right.
Okay.
Let's go ahead and go.
All right, chapter 12. Nonviolence is a striking contrast between highly evolved beings and humans, and I understand that their awareness of life is an external experience, can certainly create a context within which violence would seem as unnecessary. Might there, however, be a more practical means of reducing or even eliminating violence from the human experience? We've tried for several millennia to convince members of our species that their life is eternal. Even with this idea having been accepted by many, it doesn't seem to have reduced violence in any significant way. There is a practical way to eliminate violence. Simply move away from humanity's present deep belief in separation. Ah, yes, I get this immediately. And I don't have to be helped by highly evolved beings from another realm to do so. All I have to do is look around me. I observe right now most people who believe in God, and that is by far the largest number of people on our planet, they still embrace a separation theology. Their way of looking at God is that humans are over here and God is over there. This would not matter if it began and ended there, but the problem is a separation theology that produces separation cosmology. That is a way of looking at all of life, which says that everything is separate from everything else. This wouldn't be so bad if it was just a point of view. But the problem is a separation cosmology produces a separation psychology. That is a psychological viewpoint which says that I am over here and everyone else is over there. This would also be something we could live with if that was all there was to it. But the problem is that a separation psychology produces a separation sociology. That is a way of socializing with each other, which encourages everyone within human society to act as separate entities, serving their own separate interests. Now we've entered into a truly dangerous territory because a separation sociology inevitably produces a separation pathology, pathological behaviors of self-destruction, engaged in individually and collectively, and producing suffering, conflict, violence, and death by our own hands, evidenced everywhere on our planet throughout human history. To me, it seems that only when our separation theology is replaced by a oneness theology will our pathology be healed. A oneness theology would recognize that we have been differentiated from God, but not separated from God. Even as the fingers on our hand are differentiated, but not separated from each other, but connected by the hand itself and by the hand to the entire body. Even as we are differentiated but not separated, connected by being parts of the body of God. You have put this all perfectly. This is shared with great clarity. Well, it all came from you, of course. And now we're being encouraged once again, as we have seen in every one of the prior conversation with God exchanges with you, to understand that all of life is one thing. Yes, this is what highly evolved beings from the other dimension not only understand, but experience. They not only know that life is eternal, they know that there is no separation in the universe of anything from anything. This awareness is a pillar of their way of life. It is the foundation of their civilization. So for us then, this is the first step that will be taken when we become an awakened species. And we haven't even taken that first step after all these years, all these millennia on our planet. It's important. It's the most important step you could take right now. But do not discourage yourself with what you haven't done. Encourage yourself with what you will do. I sure hope that we do, because I can see that embracing this idea as a functional reality would be the beginning of the end of how things are on our planet right now. It would be the start of a new creation, of a new tomorrow. It would become the natural cultural story of humanity, the new cultural story of humanity. I want to run out and tell everybody, oneness is not a characteristic of life. Life is a characteristic of oneness. And that would be a very powerful message to share and powerfully put. Yes, this is what we have not understood about our existence on Earth, the understanding of which would change everything. Life is the expression of oneness itself. God is the expression of life itself. God and life are one. We are a part of life. We do not and cannot stand outside of it. Therefore, we are a part of God. It is a circle. It cannot be broken. Your understanding of this is identical to that of highly evolved beings from another dimension. And you are not the only one on this earth who is clear about this. All it takes now is for all of those who are equally clear to self-identify and then to commit joining in a global undertaking to awaken the species. But not to do so in such a grandiose way that it defeats their purpose, as no one will listen to them. It is good that you keep returning to this. It would indeed defeat your purpose if you set yourself apart as those who know and decide that it is your job to tell others what they don't know. Your mission would be to tell others that they do know, and they simply may not know what they know. This is a gentle sharing, a gentle awakening, not such a startling jolt that all anyone wants to do is go back to sleep. Okay, so I see that this single change is but another articulation of the one decision I spoke of earlier. It could quickly bring about a new way of living on Earth. That excites me. The possibilities that arise from this excite me. I'm still trying, though, to get a sense of more than just one or two ways that our daily experience here would change as a practical matter if we moved through everyday life in the way that these highly evolved beings have been encouraging us to do. I can give you a list of them. Please do.
Any comments?
Yeah, I've got one. I'm very, very upset. It's brought a flood of memories, and I'm sorry, but I'm just going to have to tell you about something that's disturbing still after almost, I don't know, 15 years. Our neighbor, who was great friends with us across the highway, owned a greenhouse and had two children who were almost exactly the same age as my son. And the daughter was 17 or something. And her boyfriend violently killed her. I mean, this is a girl that's exactly the same age as my son. And when I went to pay my condolences, the mother, the one who started the greenhouse and was working 24/7 for years and years and years, said, this is referring to the separation on page 71. She said nobody could ever understand what I'm going through. Nobody knows. And I couldn't tell her, listen, there's no such thing as death. And she was all upset that everyone was gossiping about it, as if her daughter was the only one who'd ever had to be buried. I mean, they couldn't show the body. Like, it was a scandal and a half. So she got the daughter's itty bitty dog, which was hyperactive as all get out, just to atone her own guilt. And didn't this dog run off over the highway and get killed, right? So her separation spiral, I shouldn't laugh. Sorry, but it's so tragic. It's hilarious that first the daughter gets killed and then the boyfriend throws himself off a bridge or something. Who cares, right? Then she's whining about no one understanding her. Then the dog gets run over. And I left town. This was in New Brunswick. I didn't want to hear the rest of the soap opera. But that's the story of our planet, basically, is separation and violence perpetuates through guilt and more. I mean, so the dog dies, get over it, right? But no one's dog has ever died except hers, right? Sorry.
That's okay. I think it's just an example of suffering. And we've all known people, and some of us might be those people, who've gone through tremendous ordeals. And years ago, my godmother used to say, right after some calamity, she'd say, what else could go? I'd say, stop. Don't say it. Don't ask the question. Don't throw it out there to the universe. I said, because if whatever's going to happen is going to happen, I just as soon be surprised, but I don't want to be thinking I'm looking around every corner for another tragic moment. And it's because the last thing anybody wants to do, what most of us want to do, is we don't want to be looked at as the victim. And I praise God that I don't know how any parent gets over the death of a child. I don't. And I know a couple of people who have. And I lost my twin before, one of my twins, Casey's the one that's living, before birth. And I didn't even know I was pregnant with twins at the time. And it was still a very painful loss. But the point is that some losses for some of us are so great. And I'm not talking about suicide, but we decide to kind of check out. You know, and if you're checked out, you're going to respond in different ways, I think. Over.
Yeah, I am sad to hear about the loss of the twin, because it really is a big one. I think what I'm really upset about, and I want you to check this, Linda, because you're so tuned in. I got upset about the neighbor because she was simply a reflection of my own victim mode, woe is me, and guilt and shame and all of that. Like everything she was saying was like looking at a mirror and thinking, is that what I look like? But I wasn't going to admit it. Does that sound right? You're on mute.
Maybe. I mean, really, it's for you to figure out. Only you can really know what that event meant for you. I love this chapter because this chapter is talking about stuff that I was born knowing, and you know, I've been watching people my whole life, and then go through tragic events, and my response always has been one of it is what it is. In any given moment, it is what it is, and the decision is not an external one, but it's an internal one of what is my choice of response. And humanity as a species just doesn't know that. We've not been taught that. And so, the vast majority of people are walking around truly asleep to the truth of existence. And this is we're on it right now. This is the big opportunity that we're being given, is to share this knowledge. Because think about it, if everyone understood that nobody dies, that life is a much bigger experience than this day-to-day existence that we think we're being given here. If everyone understood that no one dies and that this is just our playground for experience, I don't think people would be suffering the way they're suffering over Vegas, over Puerto Rico, over, you name it. Suffering's optional. And people just don't get that. And this book is really touching it.
I
Over.
People, oh, sorry.
Go on, Sharon.
Yeah, after you, Sarah.
Okay, thank you. This gentle awakening and this gentle sharing is not, I don't think it's easy to do, because it's such a radical, different way of being. I remember a friend of mine who went to Alcoholics Anonymous, and she said every time she went to a meeting, a woman sat down next to her and said, "You must read Conversations with God. Have you read Conversations with God?" And she said this woman kept going on and on about Conversations with God. And didn't recognize her as a human being because she was so excited about it, and this actually put her off. So how we awaken people is quite difficult to do sometimes. Over.
Yeah.
Shabana, you go.
That's exactly the point. I could hug you for saying that. Because this woman was absolutely determined, and she would have had fits of rage, like, this conversation of, like, she was going deeper down the rabbit hole. Thank you.
I just want to say, I think that there's a discernment there that's important to recognize, and that is, we don't wake up anybody. We awaken, and then we model awakened living. Other people will awaken. We can't wake anybody else up, and if we try, then we're, I believe, out of congruence with what we're here to do. Because it's a trap of judgment. Everything's divine, and so even we can look around and we can say there's all these people and they need to wake up. But that's not for us to know. The when and the how of their awakening isn't for us to know or even to deal with. It's an internal experience that each of us is brought to, I believe, through this work.
I agree with what you're saying, Linda, but I just want to underscore something. I'm on my phone call. In a minute, okay? I want to underscore, so anybody who's listening to this recording, one of the reasons I am as a compassionate person as I am is because I have had a lot of stuff happen in my life. And I choose to make that work for me rather than against me. And I am not perfect. I am not walking on water. I can still go into a slump about an event. But the older I get and the more, or as Barbara Marx Hubbard puts it, the newer I get, I'm able to pull myself out, but I'm also not afraid to share with someone if I'm in a hurting place. And so I don't want anybody to think that we're not saying that compassion isn't. I think it's part of us. It's part of who we are. And you can see that the good, even in some not so good situations. So that's all I wanted to say, is that because I know that thing about it is what it is, Linda. It probably wouldn't be appropriate to say that to somebody the minute they found out their child had just died. But that goes back to what you were saying, Linda, is that we can't wake up other people. We have to model it. We have to live it. And remind ourselves when we see unkind things going on in the world, those people just aren't there yet. And you also might be catching somebody in a moment of snap, and maybe that's not who they are all the time. And I feel like the best we can do is what Linda was saying about going within. Because if you don't go within, you go without. And that's one of Neil's sayings. And anyway, that's just what I kind of wanted to add. Over.
I've got something to say which is quite important, especially when I'm looking at Sarah. If you look at yourself, Sarah, there's huge light over your head.
You have a halo of sorts.
Yeah. But one of the biggest spiritual masters that I watch on YouTube says that he has been flying over the planet and seen light in different areas of the earth. And for Nanette to put these sayings in her car, or, like Kirsten's been doing, we discussed that, and all that is good. But what happened right now with Linda's reading, to me personally, and then Nanette confirmed it, is that at least three of us, Nanette, Linda, and myself, at least three of us went into a trance. And I believe that when we do this as a group, and Sarah's sitting there with the light over her head, I think there's a big burst of light going up. And the idea is to add to the light of the world. It doesn't have to be with actions or words. Just the heart is powerfully is the most powerful transmitter, because often I've done kindnesses, real kindnesses to people, and they've had a fit of rage, like a worse fit of rage than if I hadn't done them. So I think this is a very efficient and sort of bright idea. I'm so witty.
I just want to clarify, I wasn't suggesting that, for example, when Shabana was meeting with the woman whose daughter had been murdered, that you would, or that it would be appropriate to greet them with it is what it is. But rather, you don't say that to them, but what you do is, by you embodying the knowledge of it is what it is, and that everything is always in divine order. It can't be anything other than in divine order. And you don't say those things to someone in their pain right then, but just by being with them and being compassionate with them, they'll feel your own peace about what happened. So rather than, when someone's in trauma, choosing to show your compassion by going into the trauma with them, it's a technique to learn to stay in that place of it is what it is, to stay in the place of everything is in divine order, even in this moment of suffering, and then to hold them in compassion and help them. I think the key is to help them process how they're feeling, because the biggest challenge, I think, facing humanity is that we have not been given the skills to process our emotions. And so what happens is we see it every day in the news. When someone becomes uncomfortable with how they're feeling, they go immediately into some kind of either attack or defense. And it sets up this, like warring energy, so everything becomes a fight then. Instead of, if we knew how individually to deal with how we were feeling, and to acknowledge how we were feeling, and to allow our feelings, because we've got a society that basically teaches us to stuff our feelings down and ignore them. And that's where all of this innate anger and unhappiness and suffering and victimhood, That's where it all comes from. Because when we were little, instead of being allowed to process and shown how to process when we were upset and angry, we were told as little kids, get over it, don't cry, be good, go sit in a corner. And so the events never get dealt with. They just get stuffed away. And so then you get to a place where you get triggered. And then that's when someone becomes something that they're not normally, because they've been triggered and now they've gone into some victimhood or some story in their head. So ultimately, helping, I think the way that we help each other wake up is to start, one place to start is to help each other acknowledge and process our feelings.
Very beautifully said, Linda. And please don't think I was attacking.
Oh, no, I didn't. I just wanted to clarify.
Okay, yeah. And I think one of the really key important things about this group that gets together is that for me, it feels like a very safe place. And I feel like we're all just trying to understand things that as we read, we may think, well, I understood this before I read it. Because that's how I felt about book 1, is I thought, well, I could have written that. I would have said that, or that's what I would say. But it didn't happen that way. But it was a real joy to be reading something that you're thinking that you're remembering rather than seeing it for the first time. Over.
I just want to add something to that. The neighbor, I didn't say any of this, like I sure wanted to, but she was like a brick wall. So I went home and got a dishpan and washed, like I brought everything, the Epsom salt, you name it, towel, etc. I washed her feet, and without any problem, she wanted her feet washed, like she was glad for that. And then I cooked them a meal. And so then she says to me, my husband wants his feet washed too. She wasn't going to say that it shut me up to some extent.
That was like one of the kindest things you could have probably done.
Well, there was nothing else I could possibly do for her. Trust me, Nanette. Like she was far gone.
Yep. Well, and you know what? It's kind acts like that because we always hear these things that, God, the world is just a complete and utter mess. And so for the last few days on the Worldwide Humanities team page, 1:00 in the afternoon Mountain Time, I'm posting a picture of somebody doing a kind act because there is goodness. If we get in that mode, which is real easy to do, is that it's all chaos, and forget that there's a lot of kind things happening. There's a lot of good things happening. And sometimes it can be hard to remember that in the midst of utter chaos, that somebody else is saving a child from drowning. Somebody else is getting somebody out of a burning building. Somebody else is washing somebody's feet. And it doesn't mean we go to that place, Linda, that you were talking about, where you stuff everything and you walk around like a butterfly, just blah, blah, blah. It means that what you already said, Linda, is that we need to retrain ourselves, which is why we have a group like this, in how to move past things and not stuff things. Because you're so right. When we were little, and I was 8 years old, and my father died, and it wasn't my mother that did this, but a family friend told me to quit crying because it wasn't going to bring my dead daddy back. And this was like 15 minutes after I found out. And then my mother thought, because of the way she was raised, and this same family friend said, don't cry in front of your kids because it'll really upset them. So my mother went to a hotel for 2 days, and we had family members staying with us. I grew up believing my mother never cried. I just wasn't talked about till many years later. And so these things can happen quite by accident, although there's no such thing. And we have to be forgiving of ourselves when we might revisit that kind of behavior, because it's not healthy, spiritually or otherwise. Over.
Well, I really
I gotta
believe
go.
that.
Okay, thank you, Linda. We'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Okay, go ahead, Shimon.
As a person who's been acting out her whole life and done all the bad behaviors, I'm familiar with all of them. I'm queen of the pack. Like that's why I bring her up. I think that there's a saying that the more garbage there is, the more gold you'll get because of the alchemy.
Ah.
So I'm looking forward to the neighbor and me being quite enlightened after what we've been through, as you are, after the horrible neighbor and your mother getting this rotten advice. I don't know who it was that told you, get over it, it's not going to bring you that back, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it wasn't exactly a loving thing to say, but it catapulted you to be the Nanette we see now.
That's true, because we are the sum total of all of our experiences. And
as we process them, and you've done that.
Yeah, and
if
I think
you don't process it, you could
Builds
be
character.
the shooter.
Yeah. Well, it's important that you brought that up, because if we, and I, most of you have probably seen It's a Wonderful Life with James Stewart. It's a Christmas movie.
Yep.
And he's got the angel with him. And Jimmy Stewart's like so upset. He says, I wished I'd never been born.
Yeah.
And so what did I just drop? So the angel makes it so he was never born. And so he goes through that town, and every good deed he did for somebody else wasn't done. Everything he learned, he realizes through that movie, I'm giving myself the chills, is that he is the sum total of all those experiences, whether you've labeled them good or bad. And I don't regret, I've been pretty sad sometimes in my life, but I wouldn't take away any of the experiences. I just wouldn't. So anyway, it's after 1, and we girls could go on chatting all day. And I actually wrote Alton a note while we were on the call, because I said, we're missing you. But anyway, I love you all as usual, and ongoing and forever. And Kirsten, give me 5 minutes before I get back in touch with you.
Great.
Okay, I love you all.
Love you.
All right, next week.
Bye.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.